Okay, April, I've been following your step-by-step instructions about how to be the best, most top producing brand new real estate agent. And here I am, I've got a buyer and we are ready to write an offer. What do I do now? Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is April Nassel. I'm a real estate broker and mortgage loan broker here in Northern California. And this channel is about all things real estate. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. Please hit the like button and ring the bell so you don't miss any future videos. Now let's get into it. This is the California Residential Purchase Agreement and Joint Escrow Instructions. And it comes in this one big packet with all of these disclosures front loaded on this form.
First disclosure is just regarding the agency relationship. It basically says who's working for who. And there's a whole bunch of just extra background text for each of these forms. This is the fair housing. Basically, we're not allowed to discriminate. Here's your rights. Possible representation of more than one buyer or seller. This discusses the fact that we may represent more than one person or property at a time. Wire fraud disclosure is going to be signed by your buyer here. Everywhere, this is like my sample forms envelope, so it'll say insert signature for the seller all over the place. Okay, so moving on to the actual purchase agreement. So this purchase agreement was just recently updated in December of 22. So we have an all new form here, and it used to be just 11 pages of fine print, and it was really easy for the details to get lost in the purchase agreement. So they revised the purchase agreement so that it now has this chart on the first few pages rather than just scroll down here and show you, rather than just this sea of text that, we'd have like one blank line that you'd have to pick through and try to find, and details got missed. So now we have this beautiful chart where all of the information of the contract is essentially on the first 3 pages. So we're just going to go through this line by line, and we're going to fill out the date that you've prepared the contract here. And this is an offer from buyer. And we're going to put in the address of the property, 123 Main Street. I'm going to make this super basic. Let's go Main Street, Placerville. That's more my area. And that's going to fill in the street address, the city, the county, the zip code. You're going to put in a parcel number 000000000. You want to get the APN in there. That's an important detail that often gets missed. Seller's brokerage firm. We're going to put in all of my information here. First name, April Nassel. And I'm using Skyslope to fill this out. So when you fill it out, it might be slightly different than this, but you're going to get the gist at least. I'm going to put my address there, and my brokerage name is Gold Group Realty. We're going to save that. Okay, so then that's going to populate throughout the form. So you're going to put selling brokerage firm, their license number, selling agent, their license number, and be sure to fill out these boxes. If you're just representing the buyer, you're just going to click the buyer box. If you're representing both, be sure to pick the dual agent box. It doesn't like that I did it that way. So we're going to say we're representing both. And then here in the buyer's brokerage firm, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to put the your sorry, cut that out. You're going to put your brokerage name and license number here, your name and license number on this line, and you're going to check either the buyer's agent or both if you're doing dual agency. Now let's scroll down to the actual offer. Purchase price, we're going to do $500,000. If you have an all cash offer, you're going to check this box here for all cash. Close of escrow, oftentimes it's 30 days. So you can either put 30 days in here, or if you have a cash offer, you can do as little as 7 days. I like to pick an actual date of acceptance so that we have a date nice and clearly on the contract, and it doesn't get confusing about like weekends or holidays or anything like that. We can just put the date right into the contract and everybody knows exactly what date we're going to be closing. Expiration of offer, it defaults to 3 days, but if you want to put a little pressure on the seller, you can change this to 1 day. Initial deposit, this is your earnest money deposit, which is due in 3 days is the default, or you can change that. And that's going to be done by wire transfer, or if it's going to be another method, you can fill that in here. Initial deposit amount, I'm going to have to do a video on this separately because I don't believe in these huge earnest money deposits. In my opinion, this should always be $1,000 in California. On a rare occasion, you may have an increased deposit at a later part of the transaction. Say after certain contingencies are removed, you're going to increase that to $10,000. This is a rare occurrence, but we did start using this a little bit more when we were having a really competitive seller's market going on. Loan amount. So since we're not doing all cash here, we're going to do a loan, and we're going to say that their loan amount is $400,000. And they're going to get a conventional, or if checked, if you've got some other type of loan, you're going to check the box here and it's going to attach the appropriate addendum for that loan. You can put in your interest rates here as a cap. I don't ever do it. When we talk about writing a clean offer, it's filling in minimal amount of stuff that you need to in order to make it a very clear offer. So adding in these extra percentages doesn't really make sense. It's not something that I do because you already have the loan contingency. So you don't really need to put these caps in. Okay, additional amount finance. If you've got a second loan, you're going to put that information in here. That almost never happens because we don't really do subprime lending, second loans anymore. Occupancy type, if you've got an investment buyer or a secondary home buyer, you're going to check this box. And then it's going to auto-populate the balance of the down payment for you here. So the earnest money deposit, the $1,000 here, plus the balance of the down payment here is going to equal your total purchase price. Every page on this contract is going to get initialed by the buyer and then eventually by the seller if they've accepted the offer. Moving on to page 2. This one is a section that we use quite a bit right now, the seller credit, because we're doing a lot of temporary rate buy downs. So you're going to check this box and say you need a $10,000 seller credit. It's going to automatically calculate that percentage for you here. And it automatically defaults to being credited towards closing costs, or you can check this box if you have some other purpose for that. Additional financing terms, if you have anything else you need to add that doesn't really fit into the previous boxes, you can fill that in here. Seller agrees to pay the obligation of buyer to compensate buyer broker under a separate agreement. So perhaps this is an off-market property. You're going to want to use this form here, the SPBB, to get a compensation for the buyer's broker. Verification of all cash. If you have a cash offer, you're going to probably attach that verification to the contract, but if you don't attach it, you have to have it turned in within 3 days or whatever you fill in this blank. Same thing with verification of down payment and closing costs. It's defaulted to 3 days or whatever you put in this box here. Verification of loan application. This is your pre-approval, pre-qual, which nobody does pre-qual anymore. It's just pre-approval. Or if they're fully underwritten, you can show proof of that as well. Final verification of condition. This is your final walkthrough 5 days prior to close of escrow, or you can have some other date here, but we leave that blank. Assignment request. If you're going to assign the purchase contract to another party, you have to do that within 17 days or whatever you put in this blank. We don't normally fill that out. Loan contingency. So the contingencies section here has all these defaulted to 17 days. You can shorten these up or lengthen these as you choose. Generally, a loan contingency, you're going to need 21 days for that. So you want to get with your lender and find out about that. But oftentimes this is going to need to be 21 days. Or if you work with a super fast loan broker, such as myself, this can often be quite a bit quicker. Or if you've got an all cash offer, you're going to check the no loan contingency box. Appraisal is defaulted to 17 days. I always tighten this up. You want that appraisal done within 14 days. So I would put 14 in this box. Or if it's an all cash offer, you're going to click no appraisal contingency. This box right here is used for a really strong seller's market when we want an appraisal gap. We have in the past years seen a lot of offers for over asking price, with the buyers knowing that if the appraisal comes in low, they're going to be able to go back and renegotiate this. So you could actually check this box. Say we've got our purchase price of $500,000 up there, and say we're anticipating the appraisal only coming in at 480. We can put 480 in this box, and then that's saying that the buyer will make up the difference between the 480 and the 500. There's not going to be any renegotiations. Or that can be waived altogether, like I said, with a cash offer. Okay, investigation of property. I tighten this up. I like to make this 10 days because we don't need a full 17 days to do all of our inspections. Access to the property. This is defaulted to 17 days. You can leave that alone. Review of seller documents, also 17 days. I leave it alone. Review of the prelim or title report. I don't put anything in here. Common interest disclosures. This is like if you have an HOA. I leave this blank, just leave it to the defaulted amount. Review of leased or liened items, such as a solar agreement. This defaults to 17 days as well. If the buyer needs to sell their property before closing escrow, you can click this here and it's going to attach the form COP later on in the contract. Time of possession. I love that they changed this. So now it says upon notice of recordation. So as soon as the sale is recorded with the recording office, the buyer can take possession of the property. So I don't check anything in here anymore. I used to check this to be 4 p.m. so that someone could get their keys before the defaulted 6 p.m., which the offer used to say. Now we just go ahead and stick with the upon notice of recordation. Seller occupied or vacant units. So this is basically saying that the property is going to be delivered vacant at the close of escrow, or if you're going to allow the seller to stay for less than 29 days, you're going to check this box, and that's going to be the seller in possession form, and that will attach this if you're using SkySlope. And you put in the number of days here. So sometimes we're seeing like an extra 2 weeks for the seller to move out. Or if it's going to be a longer period than that, say you're going to let the seller have 3 months to find a property. So you're going to check this one, and that's going to attach the residential lease agreement for the seller. Occupied units, say you have a tenant in place, you're going to use the TOPA form. You're going to check that box. And that will attach the TOPA form to this. Okay, seller delivery of documents. They have to have those documents to the buyer within 7 days. The built-in escrow holder provisions and instructions, which is in this contract within 5 days, but it's in the contract, so I don't even know why it says 5 days. It's just included. Time to pay fees for ordering HOA documents within 3 days. Seller's going to install smoke detectors. They're responsible for that in California. CO detectors and water heater bracing must be done within 7 days after acceptance. Okay, we're going to move on to this section here. Anything that's included in the property, you're going to check in this. Oftentimes it's going to be the stove, sometimes the refrigerator, sometimes the washer, the dryer, the dishwasher, microwaves. Whatever you want included in the sale of the property, you're going to check these boxes. Additional items to include, let's say there's a hot tub. You can include that here in these blank lines, or if there's some special lighting fixture or something like that. You don't want to get into personal property in this too much, so you don't want to include furniture or things like that, especially if you have financing. Lenders don't always want to see personal property in the contract. Excluded items, let's say there's, how about a play structure outside? You want to make sure that they actually remove that place structure prior to the close of escrow. All right, this section is allocation of costs. So the natural hazard zone disclosure report is paid usually by the seller. I always check the environmental box. I always check the provided by box, and I put in my preferred hazard disclosure company, which is Property ID. You can include other reports here, sometimes the septic report or pest report, and who you would like to have pay for that. In this market, I'm not asking the sellers to do any further reports. Sometimes we'll do a septic, and that would be checked by seller. If you're going to check by buyer, there's no point putting it in here because their buyer is going to pay for it. So we don't need to have the seller agree for the buyer to pay for it anyway. Again, the smoke alarm, CO detectors, water heater bracing, that's contractually required by the seller in California. Any government required point of sale, we don't fill this out. Government required point of sale corrective and remedial actions, I don't fill this out. Escrow fee, in my area, we tend to do each to pay their own for both escrow and title. In other areas, this is different. So the best way to figure out what your area does is to talk to your escrow officer. Escrow holder here, you're going to put your escrow officer. So best escrow officer, or you can put your the listing agent's escrow company that they've already pre-opened with, but you're going to put the name of the person here. In this line, this is for the title company. You're going to put the name of the title company in this line. So in this case, I use Stewart Title. Okay. County transfer tax fees, we always have the seller pay this. City, we don't really have any in our area, but if you do, then you're going to want to have the seller pay for that. That's standard. HOA prep just for the disclosures, that is going to be paid by the seller. HOA certification fee gets paid by the buyer. HOA transfer fees, we always do seller on this one. Private transfer fees, there are none in our area, so we don't worry about that. But if there are, then it's going to default to the seller. Any other fees or costs that you want to make sure that you discuss, you can put them in these sections here. Home warranty, this is often paid by the seller, and we generally do 600. I use First American, and we do $600 here. So it's not some crazy expensive. Some people do really expensive home warranties, but $600 is generally enough in our area. Any other terms that you want to include that don't seem to fit into one of these previous boxes, you can put down here in these other terms. Again, buyer seller initials. And these are all the additional forms that can be attached. All of these, tenant occupied property that we discussed up there, this will automatically populate if that's clicked up above when you're using SkySlope. If it's a probate sale, you want to click that. Manufactured home, you want to click that. Just click anything that applies to this particular property. If you have any other addendums or a septic and well property monument and propane addendum, which I don't use, and I can explain why in a different video if you're interested in that. Let's see. And that is pretty much it. These ones are going to automatically attach at the end. The buyer investigation advisory, wire fraud advisory was up top. California housing and discrimination was up top. We looked at that one. The Consumer Privacy Act is down at the bottom. So I'm just going to go and scroll through these so you can see how many pages of fine print there are. Oh, and this is important to note too. These up here, this is the line item. This Q1 is the line item to identify each specific individual one. Paragraph number, this is going to give you the paragraph that associates all of the text with that particular line item. So discussing smoke alarms, CO detectors, and water heater bracing is paragraph 10B1. So then we can scroll down here until we get to paragraph 10B1, legally required installations and property improvements. So if there's any questions about something that's in the chart up at the top of the form, you can scroll down and find the corresponding text that relates to that topic. So now we scroll down through all of this and you'll notice on every page, it's asking for the buyer's initials. And then if the seller accepts or if the seller counters, the seller will initial on all of the pages as well. So we're going to get all the way down here to the liquidated damages section. This part gets initialed by both parties that there is a that the initial earnest money deposit can be liquidated if the buyer defaults. So you're going to have the buyer initial on this page here in paragraph 29. Then they're going to initial that they agreed to mediation and arbitration. And then they're going to initial the bottom of the entire page. Expiration of offer, that was already discussed up top. If it is in a trust or an LLC that's purchasing, then this box is going to be checked here. The buyer is going to sign. This is already auto-populated from above. And if they're in an LLC or a trust or something of that nature where there's a representative, then you're going to check this box. Their name is going to go here and their title is going to go here. And then if the seller accepts the offer, they're going to go ahead and sign down here. If they're going to counter the offer, they're going to select the seller counter offer box, and they're still going to sign at the bottom. This final section has all of the information about the buyer's brokerage firm, the seller's brokerage firm, and the escrow holder. Once the contract is agreed upon and sent over to escrow, this will be filled out by the escrow company and returned back to you. Seller is supposed to have this initialed when they presented the offer and have the seller initial here, but nobody ever really does that. It tends to fall through the cracks quite a bit. So here's that buyer investigation advisory that we pointed out up above with all of the possible investigations that can be done. And they're going to sign on it. Fair Appraisal Act Addendum disclosure is also added in here. Buyer's going to sign. Consumer Privacy Act, buyer is also going to sign here. And that is it. That's the entire residential purchase agreement in California. I hope all of that was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. You can always DM me over on Instagram at April_Nossel. And until next time, happy selling.